Who put the glad in gladiator?
Yes, this month I'm taking a look at a personal favourite from my childhood, Disney's... Or to put it more accurately, Disney's action game featuring...
Wowzers and trousers, what a mouthful!
First off, this title is obscure to me. It's not as though this is the only action game licensed by Disney, even as of 1997. And featuring, it's not like Hercules makes a cameo or anything, it is Hercules. It follows the plot of the movie almost perfectly, sort of. Yeah, even with only 10 levels, it manages to stray a little from its source material, but we'll get to that later. What you'll notice initially is that time has not been kind to this side-scrolling platformer. Hercules' face is a mass of pixels, and the controls are extremely basic. There's a jump, a sword slash, an overly dramatic crouch that you'll probably never fucking use. Seriously, what the hell? But do the dated graphics and unengaging mechanics really detract from the overall game?
Yes, they do.
It's unfortunate, but this game is kinda lackluster by today's standards. That's kind of an understatement too. And nowhere near as great as everybody remembered.
Oh boy.
Yeah, take off your rose-tinted beer goggles, everybody. Hercules ain't the sexy muscle man you remembered.
But where I will give the game some credit is for its attention to detail. While the graphics may look pretty laughable now, the 2D side-scrolling actually works in the game's favor to an extent, in that it really does look like the movie. Care and attention has clearly been invested in its backgrounds and animations, and this reminiscence is further reinforced by the appearance of such memorable characters, including Nessus, the Cyclops, the Harpies, yes they did feature in the movie, and that most memorable of characters, the blue screaming fish.
Is it just me who finds it bizarre that this fish was slapped on so much merchandise? Of all things!
Anyway, the game begins with Hercules training to be a hero with Danny DeVito. That's DeVito for I am rather frustrated. The objective being to destroy these evil sandbags and save the damsels. Don't chop them up like 7-year-old me did.
Trust me, you won't get very far. I just love the idea that I just saved the damsel in distress and then decided to massacre her too. Obviously, I just had a hunch that rag doll had it in for me.
As you progress, you become familiar with various pickups and collectibles. There are coins, which don't seem to serve much purpose other than to earn you an extra life should you achieve a high percentage. Why is there a goat here? Cups of Herculade! Refill your health meter if you're finding the evil bags to be a little too overwhelming for you, while little Hercules action figures permanently extend this meter somehow.
I'm sure that plastic tastes great. Very nutritious.
But wait, there's more! If you collect the letters to spell your name, you can earn an extra continue to stave off the dreaded game over screen, which actually looks kinda cool.
I'd happily die over and over again just to see that. To hell with spelling my name.
Whoops, you're dead, but hey, you get a cool clip to watch.
Every cloud, I guess.
Ah yes, collecting letters. Very unique.
Never seen that in a Disney game before. Except, Okay, I think we get the point.
But perhaps the most exciting collectible is these gifts from the gods. Throughout, you can find some special swords, each harnessing a different power. For example, one shoots fireballs, while another fires a continuous bolt of lightning that can be directed so it can destroy enemies in its vicinity. They're not permanent, however, and their limited energy is represented by this incredibly hard to spot meter in the top right. See it? Just there. See it? No? What I like about this game is that it's not exclusively a side-scroller. There are pathways into the background, which allows for more hidden areas and secret items. And goats! Lots of goats. Jesus, where's Wallace and Gromit when you need them? This place is full of goats. Immediately after this level, we arrive at the hero's gauntlet. And with no warning whatsoever, the format of the game changes entirely.
I don't know what's going on.
Suddenly, we're running non-stop along a dangerous obstacle-laden road.
If I didn't know any better, I'd say Danny DeVito here was trying to murder me. Maybe he's conspiring with Rosie and Jim over here. I'm not insane, I promise.
Collecting damsels here isn't a high priority. The main objective is simply to stay alive and save your own ass.
Yeah, screw everybody else. It's every man for himself. Top training there, Danny. Top training.
Soon afterwards, we enter the Centaur Forest, the first post-training level, and a level which bizarrely seemed to terrify me as a kid. The griffins and the centaurs in the background were actually kinda creepy to me. And don't get me started on this guy.
Maybe he's a friend. Shouldn't judge a book by its cover, after all. Yeah, perhaps not. Still, I'm sure he's just some lost trouble ruffian of no concern to this demigod. I'm sure we can settle our differences amicably. Or we can just cut him to shreds. Either way is fine.
What I do appreciate about this game is that they don't spoon-feed their young demographic. While the game is relatively short and the gameplay is pretty simplistic, they nonetheless hide items well. Most of the letters are in trees or in locations that stray from the level's linear progression, which is pretty neat. Some may argue that this makes the game's difficulty inconsistent, but I personally like the added challenge. Before too long, we come across the Centaurs.
Now, despite their depictions in traditional Greek mythology, those familiar with the likes of Fantasia, for example, will know that centaurs these days are often portrayed as peaceful creatures, prancing about majestically, finding love, and bestowing upon the land an air of calm serenity. These warm, whimsical hybrids are nothing but delicate in manner, and I'm sure that the Hercules video game will continue to portray them in such a light. Oh, you know what? Fuck you! Yeah, it turns out that after all the centaurs found love, Hercules turned up and slaughtered them all. I do love a good happy ending.
The latter parts of the level genuinely creep me out when I played this as a kid, as it sees you having to delve deeper into the background, avoiding the boulder-throwing centaurs and the griffins, whose attacks are pretty brutal by Disney standards. Eventually, we encounter Nessus, who's holding Meg hostage, our real damsel in distress. Yeah, let's not chop her up like the others, yeah? This boss initially took me a while to get the hang of, as it's not explicitly clear what to do. Nessus will attack you, and then he'll turn his back to check on Meg. At this point, you need to jump on his back and ride him.
Oh yeah.
You've been a bad horse, haven't you?
Once he's dazed and confused, you finish him off with one final punch.
Kinky.
Before we move on, one thing I neglected to mention was the fact that you cannot save unless you've collected 4 secret password vases in a level. Yeah, these old games were hard on you.
Well, it would be hard if this entire game weren't so easy. You can play the whole thing in one sitting without saving.
Since this is also a pretty old game and hardly anyone in ancient Greece had memory cards yet, these vases also act as passwords as an alternative. The password screen can be accessed via the main menu and is presented by our damsel in distress, who we totally did not chop into slices, Megara.
So, you got a password with you, or you just stopping by to say hi?
The concept of having Grecian urns representing passwords sounds like a neat idea, until it comes to writing these passwords down. Seriously, what the hell were they thinking? 7-year-old me really struggled, but hey, they're still recognizable, kind of. What do you mean this looks nothing like Pegasus? I'll have you know art was my forte. I also feel sorry for Meg, who's likely suffered a great deal of repetitive strain injury from my constantly rotating the vases.
Sorry about that.
Before long, our nemesis Nessus is no more, and we arrive in Thebes. This level is surprisingly dull, actually, despite being a hotspot for harpies and the monstrous Minotaur, who doesn't actually do a fat lot besides throwing paving slabs at you. What a waste of those bullhorns, man. You'd think about halfway through this long, boring fight, he'd wise up to the fact that this technique is not working.
Nope.
Luckily for you, this massive brick keeps reappearing, so you can throw it back at him. Perhaps if he moved once in a while, he'd be more successful.
Still, can't complain too much. He accomplishes way more than Pete ever did. Blink your eyes or something, Jesus Christ, mate.
For the most part, this level sees you perform all the moves you've done before, only in a different setting. It's pretty tedious, although I have to once again give some credit for the inclusion of some impressive movie references. The cat Snowball, who is revealed in the movie as having been saved from a fire, appears every now and again as an obstacle, struck by lightning and leaving a trail of flames behind, while the woman who is seen wringing out her clothes is here seen pursued by an unrelenting rain cloud. It doesn't add much to the actual gameplay, but it at least feels like you're playing a role in the movie. Just remember to avoid Crackpot Carol here. Every time you see her, the earth moves.
And not in a good way. Keep your distance, fellas.
The level is well made, but it just seems to go on and on and on and on and on, and if only something interesting would happen.
Hey, look! A goat!
Oh dear. Are they okay? They don't look okay. The next level sees us take care of the Hydra. As we know from the movie, chopping off its many heads doesn't work.
So, how do we defeat it then? We chop off its heads. Yeah.
Whoa, that's a bit gruesome.
Remember, of course, that this was the late 90s, a time when nobody gave a toss about exposing kids to bloody violence. And it was bloody great!
What's more, it's interesting to note that this is the only 3-dimensional enemy in the entire game.
Savor it, kids, the game's graphics peak here.
Collectibles seem to be hidden in the various heads, and only chopping them off in a certain order will reveal the password vases. How they expected kids to know this is beyond me. Eventually, the Hydra is inexplicably crushed by a big rock out of nowhere, and Hercules takes all the credit. Which raises an interesting point. Despite Hercules' immense godlike strength, he doesn't actually accomplish much besides winning a rodeo contest. And the following level is no different. We now progress to Medusa's Lair, based on that 2-second clip you probably don't remember from the movie. This boss even precipitates her own demise. Utilizing her gaze, Hercules gets her to dismantle the pillars around her temple, causing the conveniently placed mirrors suspended above to fall to the ground and into her line of view, eventually turning her to stone. Yeah, you barely have to do anything. This level is quite the challenge, though it would be more of a challenge challenge were Medusa not such a bloody moron.
One wonders why she decorated her own lair with mirrors in the first place. Yeah. Fucking idiot.
The falling debris is possibly the most annoying aspect of this level besides the skeletons, as you can't easily discern what's in the foreground and the background. Seriously, whenever I play this, I just flail back and forth and hope for the best. Next up, we have another one of these levels that sees us running frantically towards a rampaging Cyclops. This is pretty frustrating as the citizens of Thebes are running in the opposite direction.
Quite wisely, I might add.
And it's near enough impossible to avoid every citizen or piece of debris flung your way. I must say though that Hercules is doing surprisingly well considering he's meant to be mortal at this stage. Think anybody else has headbutted a wall like that and survived? And if the citizens and debris don't hurt you, then the goats, who are practically camouflaged against the brown stone, surely will.
You know what? This game doesn't have enough goat.
Also, I hate this level because, as far as I'm aware, it's the only level in which you cannot attain 100% completion because they decided to place coins on either side of the road simultaneously.
Who designed this?
The level isn't all that varied and seems to go on forever until it just kind of ends. Yay, I guess. We don't seem to be any closer to Mr. Cyclops, but Herc seems happy. Next is Titan Flight, which sees us take control of Pegasus as we head to Mount Olympus to free Zeus and the other gods, avoiding the wrath of the Titans, which is more difficult than it sounds when you can only fly within the parameters of a square 90s television aspect ratio. It sounds exciting having you avoid the 4 Titans individually as they bombard you with their elemental powers, and then occasionally face this flying thing, whatever it is. Ultimately though, this level is surprisingly dull considering the Titans don't really seem to attack you directly, but it's nonetheless a change of pace from what we've already played so far. Although speaking of pace, Pegasus seems to fly slower than you can walk. You have reached your destination.
I'm not flying Olympus Air again!
Next stop, the Underworld, and this is a pretty elaborate title, Passageways of Eternal Torment.
Bit overblown for the Underworld.
And yes, it's another one of these levels, where you can't stop running for some reason. Looks like Herc's had too much caffeine again. What do they put in these things? Anyway, avoiding griffins, skeletons, big rocks, and Hades himself, it's your job to navigate the obstacle course to find Hades' lair. This level is arguably the most difficult of this style. With the many skeletons and piles of bones and rocks blocking your path, this is pure hell.
Suppose that's to be expected, really. I mean, it is hell.
Before too long, we reach the Vortex of Souls, where we battle Hades in what is surprisingly the most low-key battle so far. But possibly, it's got pretty close competition. He at least moves around, which is more than can be said for the likes of Medusa, the Minotaur, and Pete, but there's no special technique you need to employ to attack him. You just need to keep hitting him. I always imagined it would be a nice touch if your health slowly depleted during this level. You know, kind of signifying how Hercules grew old trying to rescue Meg from the River of Death. But nope, everything is fine. One thing that's always confused me is how to obtain the password visors in this level. I've managed it before a few times, and ironically for this recording I actually did it again, but they seem to randomly drop when you hit Hades, and he doesn't always drop all 4 of them. Unlike the other levels like the Hydra, I can never seem to identify a system here, but if you don't manage to find them all, you're really not missing much. Entering this password simply lets you watch all the low-resolution full-frame movie clips from the game. Yippee!
Kind of a measly reward for a true hero.
Once you've completed this level, you're rewarded with one final movie clip. Interestingly, in medium mode, the clip fades out early, but in Herculean mode...
Ah, fucking hell! Jesus!
You're rewarded with a song. Yay. With frankly horrendous sound and picture quality.
Are we still in hell? I can't tell. Of course, everyone's happy now, but in the original Greek myth, Hercules actually murdered Meg and their entire family. Can't wait for that straight-to-DVD sequel.
Alright! This game is only really fun to play for nostalgia reasons, but I will say it follows the movie fairly well, despite some bosses that detract from the overall plot. I appreciate the game's look and soundtrack. While it sounds very MIDI, it's nonetheless noticeably derived from the movie's songs and score. But the gameplay is pretty simplistic and surprisingly tedious at times, particularly in Thebes. The dull grey backgrounds don't help all that much. While the settings look as though they were lifted from the movie itself, the game mechanics leave a lot to be desired. Is it the worst thing you'll ever play? Far from it, but this game is hardly a gift from the gods.
I just love an unhappy ending.
Take it away, Meg. Is she okay?
Silence is gone.